Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report. Coming up on today's show, Raiders trade candidates at the NFL trade deadline. Every time I do this show, people get upset because, Mitch, why would you want the Raiders to trade away these players? It's not that I want the Raiders to trade away these players. It is, if the Raiders are not playing good football and they know that this season is not going to turn into the playoffs, do you potentially move on from your best players, your highest assets, to try to get more draft capital in the future? Those are the players that you're going to see here on today's show. Why? Because those are the players that probably only have trade value. If you don't know what the NFL trade deadline is, and if the Raiders are sellers, unfortunately, that's going to stink. I'm hoping the Raiders can go on a little bit of a winning streak here with their next 4 games in. Who knows? Maybe that they would be buyers, because the trade deadline is October 31st, Halloween, at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Luckily for you, Jeremy Chuggs and I, no matter what, we will be live during the NFL trade deadline, so make sure you're subscribed, make sure you got those notifications turned on. But if the Raiders lose 3 out of their next 4 games, I honestly think that they could be major sellers here at the deadline. I will say, if the Raiders do end up making a trade before the deadline, if they make one probably at any point, I'm probably going to go live here on the Raiders Report. And if it's a monster trade, we're going to be live for a long time. I was live for, I think like 8 hours when the Raiders traded for Davante Adams. I don't know what trade would have to go down for me to be live for 8 hours, but my point is this. I got a commitment to excellence. And speaking of commitment to excellence, I know that these people also who are a part of the Noti Gang also have a commitment to excellence. If you want to see your name up here on a show, make sure you're subscribed, but also try to be one of the first 5 people that comment on my video. So shout out to D, Preston, Michael, Anthony Parks, Real One for Life, 1960. I salute you. Thank you so much for being a part of my Noti Gang. So coming up here, we're going to get into the 5 players that I believe would be the most likely to get traded if the Raiders were sellers at the deadline. The first name that comes up has got to be the name that, as soon as I talk about this video, has to pop up into your mind, and it's Hunter Renfrow. And I know that we sat here and said during the offseason, Renfrow's going to get traded. Renfrow's going to get traded. At this point, I would almost rather the Raiders trade Hunter Renfrow, because if you're not going to use him, and when they do try to use him, he looks unmotivated, I'd rather you just try to save the money and move on from a player, because he looks unmotivated right now, and maybe it's because he's seen only 7 targets. But he had a very costly drop this past week that would have been an easy first down. But in the 14 games with Josh McDaniels, Hunter Renfrow has started in only 1 of them. Only 1 game Hunter Renfrow started. Imagine an offseason where you pay a receiver a 2-year deal, $32 million, you give him $21 million guaranteed, and yet you really don't even play him all that much. And then when you do, you don't even target him. The math there doesn't math. It doesn't make sense from top to bottom. I know for a fact Hunter Renfrow will not be back next season. And if you know that he's not going to be back next season, you might as well get something from him. So not only am I going to be talking about players that could be potentially traded, if I do a video like this, I think I'd be bad at my job if I didn't also say, well, what could you potentially get for Hunter Renfrow? And right now, 7 targets, 5 catches, 52 yards. I hate to break it to you. I've been telling people for a long time, you're not going to get a lot. You're not going to get a lot for him. And right now, I believe that the Raiders would settle for a 6th-round pick. There might not even be teams that would want to take on his contract and give you a 6th-round pick. Like maybe the New Orleans Saints because of his buddy Derek Carr. Maybe a team like the Buffalo Bills, who I do think could use a slot receiver. But here's the other thing that you have to think about when you talk about players at the NFL trade deadline, especially for a team that could potentially be a seller. It's important to know that it's like a yard sale. Nobody that's ever been to a yard sale, me growing up in central Pennsylvania, shout out to the 570, I was a frequent flyer at yard sales with my mother. You're not going to a yard sale looking to spend a lot. So if you're a seller at the NFL trade deadline, more than likely, whatever you're putting out there on the yard to sell, you're not going to get a lot for it. The price tag, as Jeremy said, is a suggestion. If you don't have at least one woman, probably named Karen, who comes up to you and goes, instead of a quarter, can I give you a nickel? Then you're not doing a yard sale the right way. Here's my question to you, though. Will the Raiders be buyers or sellers at the deadline? Because that's the biggest discussion of the NFL trade deadline. Are there teams that try to go out and win a championship, become a buyer? Or is there a team like the Raiders where right now you're 1-3? If you're not good at the deadline, you might as well start shipping off some pieces to get extra draft capital and get ready for next season when you got a brand new head coach. The only reason why they might not be a seller is because if Josh McDaniels wants to keep his job, I think he has to be able to look himself in the mirror and go, you know what? If we sell, I might not be back next season. Let's go to the next name up here for a Raiders trade candidate, and it's Josh Jacobs. Again, the names that you're going to see on the show are going to make you mad because what we have right now is a 1-3 football team, and I'm putting players up here that will not be back next season. I know that a lot of Raider fans like Josh Jacobs, but I said it in the offseason, and I said it again. The Raiders will not bring back Josh Jacobs next season. They're not going to give him another franchise tag. The Raiders are ranked dead last in rushing yards per game right now with 65.3, and if a winning team needs a running back, they could potentially make the move. And you might as well try to get something for him because you know he's not going to be back. Is Zamir White a good running back? No, he's not. The Raiders are going to have to draft a running back next season. No matter what, it's already going to happen. But considering the fact that you're paying him the amount of money that you're paying him, I still think Jacobs is a talented back. However, though, if teams are going to stack the box, and if you're going to have a running back that's making all this money and no matter what, they still can't do anything, ship him off. Try to get something for him. And if you're a team that's selling, it does make sense to sell a running back like Jacobs. Now, I know people think that Jacobs is going to get a first-round pick. You ain't getting a first-round pick on Josh Jacobs. Look at the trade values out there for Jonathan Taylor. They try to get a second-round pick. Teams really weren't even interested in a second-round pick. I'd say if the Raiders were sellers at the NFL trade deadline, the Raiders would look to get a third-round pick. They might even settle for less. Again, this is a suggestion because it is a yard sale. And if you think that the Raiders are getting a second-round pick, if you think the Raiders are getting a first-round pick for Josh Jacobs at the deadline, I'm sorry. You are absolutely insane. Speaking of insane, we got insane deals because we got an amazing sponsor here on the show. Shout out to Game Time. Last-minute tickets. It is the perfect app for anybody planning a trip to Las Vegas because things happen literally the spur of a moment. So what's funny is I've been using Game Time for a long time, way before they were a sponsor here on the show, and I actually bought my fiance's dad tickets to the Raiders and Cowboys game because I knew it was last-minute tickets, and if anybody knows my fiance, if you're basically doing everything at the very last minute. So Nation, create an account, redeem code Raiders Chat for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and a whole lot more. It is the perfect app for buying tickets when you're planning on visiting Las Vegas. So download the Game Time app today, Nation. The link's going to be available for you guys down in the comments and down in the description. Probably my favorite feature about the app when I'm looking for tickets, especially like at a Raiders game, like this is the perfect picture to show you. I like to know, like, what does it look like? Like, sure, you get like the stadium view and you can kind of see like, all right, I'm going to be behind the Raiders here. Oh, I'm going to be top right corner. This, you actually get to see what it looks like. I like that view. They also end up like ranking the prices. They have the tickets that are hot. Game Time is a totally amazing app, but they're also going to really change your way how you buy tickets. So use promo code Raiders Chat for $20 off and download the Game Time app today. Let's go to the next player here that I think could end up getting dealt, Bilal Nichols. And the reason why Bilal Nichols is on here is because teams that are fighting for a Super Bowl know that games are won in the trenches. And the more and more I've watched this Raiders team, the more and more I realize that this team doesn't care about the trenches. They don't care about the defensive tackle group. And if I'm the Raiders, I'm keeping John Jenkins out there because he's been your best defensive tackle. And then I also want to give some reps to Nesta Jade Silvera. I want to give some reps to Byron Young, some of the younger guys. And I think in terms of which defensive tackle has the most value right now on the silver and black, it's Bilal Nichols because of the age, because of the past experience, and because of his production. And I know it's not a lot of production, but the Raiders don't have a lot of production right now for players that are under the age of 30 at the defensive tackle position. So if you could get something for Bilal, why not look to try to do it? Because you're doing this rotation right now, and Nichols hasn't even really been all that special. So if there was a team that said, you know what, I'm going to go out and try to get Bilal Nichols here, 7th round pick for him, and you'd be able to ship him off and sell him. You're not going to get anything more for him. He hasn't been all that good. He's in the final year of his deal, which means he's not going to be back next season. Move on from Bilal Nichols and at least get something. Let's go to this name, and this is the one that I know is going to open up a lot of eyes. It's Jimmy Garoppolo. This is more what I would do. If I'm the Raiders, and I know that I am a seller, believe me, speaking of sell, it's a hard sell to Mark Davis because, let's face the facts here, Mark Davis paid Jimmy Garoppolo $33 million guaranteed money. And after 8 weeks, I'm sitting up here at the time. Again, the deadline is after week 8. I'm saying, I know you gave him a lot of money, but we're trying to build for the future here, and we're trying to get at least something for the quarterback. If the Raiders are 1-7, they should trade Jimmy Garoppolo. If the Raiders are 2-6, I think that the Raiders should probably trade Jimmy Garoppolo, and then you let Aiden O'Connell get more reps. The biggest thing that would hold this back is Mark Davis saying, well, wait a minute, I gave Jimmy G all this money. But the only other way that I think that you might actually be able to get some better compensation in terms of draft capital is if, just like anything, if a quarterback goes down. I don't know which team would be in that situation where you're like, all right, I'm a Super Bowl caliber team. I just lost my quarterback for the season, and now I need to go out and get a QB like Jimmy G. I don't know if the Raiders would even trade with the Chiefs. I mean, Jeremy just whispered Chiefs in my ear. I don't know if you trade within your division. Though, if a team gave you a first-round pick, shit, yeah, let's make it happen. To me, though, with Jimmy Garoppolo, because he plays quarterback, I'm saying at best, you'd get a third-round pick if a team felt like Jimmy Garoppolo was the quarterback that could help them get to the next hump. Like, honestly, the team that I think makes the most sense, which might be weird for some people, the 49ers. If Brock Purdy ends up getting hurt, Sam Darnold ends up going down, then you got to go out and get a Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm sure I could come up with another team that's a quick passing offense that could use him. If it's not, you're going to get a fifth at the absolute best for Mr. Jimmy G. I got one more name to bring up here. However, I do want to keep you guys up to date with everything that we're doing here on the Raiders Report. So I'm live right now recording this on Tuesday, and I'm going to be live every single Tuesday, every single Monday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm also going to be live on Thursday, Bears, Commanders, Thursday Night Football. I'm rooting for the Bears. If the Bears win on Thursday Night Football, the Raiders, I believe, have the #1 overall pick if the season were to end today. Then on Sunday, the Chiefs and Broncos, they don't play against each other, but since the Raiders play on Monday Night Football, which we will be live for, I'm going to be live on Sunday rooting against the Chiefs, rooting against the Broncos here on the Raiders Report. Let's go to the final trade candidate here, and this is another one that's not going to make people happy. It's Davante Adams. I know Davante Adams has said that he doesn't want to be traded, and I hope that he doesn't want to be traded. But if the Raiders are in a spot here where they're 1-7, I mean, you saw how frustrated Adams was after a 1-2 start, after a 1-3 start. If the Raiders lose to the Chicago Bears, his old team, the Green Bay Packers, and the New England Patriots, and now you're potentially 2-6, 1-7, well, then I think anything's possible. And I don't even know if at that point I would blame Davante for wanting out. Here's the thing, though. Trading away Davante means that the Raiders are throwing away $7.8 million for this year in dead cap hit, and they've already paid him $16.9 million in 2024. So essentially, you're throwing out $24.7 million to not have Davante Adams on your team. I know Adams doesn't want to get dealt. Adams wants to be a Raider. He's made that very, very clear. He wants to succeed here. But the value of Davante, unlike all these other guys, that doesn't go down, right? Like Lamborghinis, the value doesn't go down. Rolls Royce, the value of that, it doesn't go down. You know why? Because it doesn't ever need to go down. And unlike all the other 3-4 players that I talked about, which I said yard sale, you don't find Lamborghinis, you don't find Ferraris on a yard sale. And I don't think that the Raiders would even put Davante on the trade block. The way that this trade ends up going down is Davante saying this, hey, you guys traded for me. You told me that we were about to be a Super Bowl caliber team. Then when you traded away my buddy Derek Carr, I asked you one thing. Put me in the loop to decide who is the next quarterback of the Raiders. You ignored me. You didn't do that. I called you out this offseason and said I didn't like the way that this offense was trending. And as it stands right now, the Raiders have one of the worst offenses in the league. So since you're not going to listen to me, I want to get the hell out of here, and I want to go somewhere else where somebody's going to actually be able to use my talent. Now, again, a lot can happen, and I hope it doesn't happen. But the Raiders, if you trade away Davante and you're paying $24.7, you better get 2 first-round picks for him. Like, you better get 2 first-round picks for him. People are going to talk about Davante trade rumors. Get ready for it. I don't want it to happen. Nobody wants it to happen. But that rumor, all that I just talked about, will continue to get circulated. So be honest with me here. If the Raiders traded away Davante Adams, what would you do? This is a very open-ended question. And I want y'all to vent down below, because what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to take some of my favorite responses to this question here on the video that goes out, and I'm going to put them on the show, because I want people to see how much Davante Adams means to this roster. And you know what? There's another player that I know people are going to get thrown in some trades, and we'll talk about him here in just a second. But if you haven't followed me on Twitter, make sure you do so. If you haven't followed me on IG, make sure you do so. I'm at Mitchell Renz 365, literally everywhere. I know we make a lot of content here on YouTube, videos every single day, live multiple times a week. But I'm on social media giving my opinion every single day, all the time. It's my job, and I take it very, very seriously. So please, if you want more info from me, find me on social media. The final player is this, Maxx Crosby. But guess what? He's not available. The only player on the Raiders that is not available in a trade is Maxx Crosby. Now, I get it. There's a lot of other deals out there, like trading Tyree Wilson, the contract. Doesn't make sense to do that. But the only player that I know for a fact that has value, that there might be a team crazy enough to ask, hey, what do you want for Maxx Crosby? He's not available. The Raiders will never trade him. He's the face of the franchise. He will retire a member of the Silver and Black. So one more time here, our Raiders trade candidates. I would say Renfrow's the most likely. Josh Jacobs is definitely a name to keep in mind. Bilal Nichols, those are your top 3. And then Jimmy Garoppolo, not as likely unless the quarterback ends up getting injured. And then Devonte Adams. But to me, that's only if he wants out, because he's so sick of what McDaniels and Ziegler have constructed. Remember, if any trade ends up going down, we'll keep you updated here. We'll make a video on it. And if it's a big enough trade, we will be going live here on the Raiders Report.